I am trying to take this from my own personal journey. I have done it a few times where I've sort of tried to relay how I began researching Tartaria. I mean, at the outset, I was obviously very skeptical, as a lot of people are. Um, at the outset, at the beginning, looking at maps was my way into the topic. And then once I had got more confidence about even mentioning the name, because a lot of people want you to prove your allegiance as soon as you start talking about it, and you can't keep backtracking and defending even the name itself, which unfortunately is still a was a word for the black swarthy complexion of a human. Um, which is really useful in identifying the origin of the lineage itself, which is what fascinates me, specifically my own lineage, which ends up going all the way back to Iran, and then also the history of Europe, which I'll touch on later, but I have to avoid certain topics in order to introduce Tartaria within like an hour. So Grand Tartary was the largest landmass that was labeled Tartaria. Great time to move on to the map here. Thank you very much. I mean, this is what really got me excited because there are a lot of these, and they are all different. They all originate in different parts of the world, specifically Europe, where a lot of maps came from. People seem to be able to travel in larger fleets of ships, which had some chance of someone returning. You must remember in the 15th century, if you were to travel to another part of the world, it would usually end with a large percentage of the crew of your ship not returning from scurvy, even though they began to solve that by having fresh lemons on board, and a lot of alcohol was used. Alcohol also is very important in ascertaining how the migrations happened with the Tartarian Empire, with the Moorish Empire, with the Slavs, the Europeans. If you have a high threshold when it comes to alcohol, then I think from that you can almost determine someone's origin, or at least in broad strokes, you can sort of say, okay, food was preserved in alcohol within these certain large empires. So if you can deal with drinking a lot of alcohol, then you are most likely going to be able to say that you are a Tartarian traveler, or you are linked to a lineage that is the Tartarian lineage. These maps are really important to me because that's how my journey began. If you notice on this map here, which is the Abraham Ortelius map of 1560, you can see that China was at this point only a small sort of ocean coastal empire, with Korea nearby. You won't see any K's or J's in these maps because that was not introduced until the 17th century. Those letters, K and J. Actually, the G and the K became interchangeable in the late 16th century. Sorry, 1500. Yeah, this is just my own personal starting place, and it's usually how I try to prove Tartaria exists, which is something I still get asked a lot, even in 2024. The genealogy of the ancient emperors of Tartary. I do read and write a little bit of Chinese. I do speak Chinese a little bit. I also speak and read and write fluent German. So that's helped me. That's kind of made it quite easy when it comes to some of the connections to Genghis Khan. For some reason, the amount of German researchers that began to draw maps and plot the rise and fall of the, the greater Mongolian Empire, the Manchu Empire, the Han and the Qing dynasty, which become very important later on as Genghis Khan takes over the entire Silk Route. A lot of a lot of really interesting research has been done recently on on trying to understand which cities on the Silk Route were possibly the capital of Tartaria. But the most important thing is to remember that Tartaria was more than one empire at this point. So the height of the empire, I would say, was around the 15th, 17th century. China was still not given much space to kind of evolve. And the Great Wall of China, as it's known today, is holding back all of these coastal empires here, like China, Korea. So the Great Wall of China, therefore, wasn't constructed to keep out any kind of Turkic people or Tartarian people. It was constructed by the Tartarians to keep out anyone who approached from the ocean. And I know for a fact that if you don't want to have an unprotected coastline, this is exactly how the Dutch lost New York to the New Amsterdam. This is exactly how the British got into China. I think what happened with China and Britain may have been some kind of serious sort of what would you call it, an alliance that was probably the beginning of the end of Grand Tartary. So the genealogy shows us here that Genghis Khan would have been considered to be Tartarian, as he was also quoted as the Emperor of Tartary at one point. I can move to the next slide. Yeah, I hope you enjoy this introduction into the Mythic Empire. I was going to start with Noah. There were three sons. Japheth was one of those. We go to Gog, and then Gog of Magog is not. I mean, in the Bible, Gog of Magog is mentioned a few times, but Magog would then be the father. Gog would be of Magog, and the son. So both of these would have been in that lineage. Moses does not speak much about Japheth, but I don't see Japheth as like the evil son of Noah. He was actually one of the ones that kind of saved Noah from embarrassment when he got drunk in one of the stories. Whereas Ham made fun of his father, and I think Shem and Japheth ended up kind of hiding him and giving him the respect he deserved as the patriarch. So I find this to be also symbolism. I think this is also a message in the Bible. There are all kinds of messages. A lot of books have been removed from the Bible. I think initially there were 88. We now only have 66 of those books. Each book of the Bible is, in my opinion, for quite some time, is an important resonance. Just like Campbell was talking about earlier, I think there's a frequency to every book in the Bible. I think every book in the Bible can be linked to everything else. I think this realm is super connected, interconnected. It's from colors to tones to notes to the frequency of everything we think and do. I think that the original harp, obviously laid flat vertically, is the piano. So you have 88 keys on the piano in the Bible. Music and resonance is essential to understanding and to not just hearing what is being said, but to somehow find a place for it, or to get what you can for your own ascent, because you are also ascending up your own ladder of understanding. So then the Scythians come after Gog of Magog, then the Turkic tribes. I'm not going to go too much into that because there are a lot of people doing great research on the Turkic tribes, and Samarkand, which would have been their capital city. Then we have Tamerlane, a fascinating character. Tamerlane and some of the information about him, some of the documents about him I'm going to go into, because they have crests on them. They have actual moorheads on the crest, family crests, sigils, which is another thing that I really need to delve into more. I think that's where the Hebrew origin of the English language and the French and the German and the Spanish languages come in so important to kind of see the link between how language develops as this super creative empire starts to get removed from history. Genghis Khan also would be the next in line from that lineage, and then the Mongol Turkic legacy, which is obviously almost the control of the entire world, all the way from the from the Hindu Kush to the steps of Vienna, the capital of Austria. So then this is my own theory, my final addition, something that I don't think anyone else has researched. Chiang Kai-shek. Now, Chiang Kai-shek was the last president of the ROC out of Peking. And Peking was my second awakening because I actually lived in the Republic of China. So I can walk down the street and I can study temples that were obliterated during the Cultural Revolution. Chiang Kai-shek, I have very high quality footage because I'm part of certain groups in the Republic of China that are sharing footage that I don't think anyone in the West would have ever seen. Before the fall of Tartaria, or before the fall of the Boxer Revolution, which was all about, I think, Western powers coming into East Asia and giving military prowess or military advantages and resources to China to help China take over and destroy and take all of the gold out of Khartoum City. So Chiang Kai-shek was the last president. He had to leave. Now, I think his wife was actual royalty. I think he was a voted-in president of the political party, the Kuomintang, and I think that his wife was actual royalty. I think she was like the queen. And because she ended up becoming so famous in America, she went on political, public, you know, seminars all over the United States. But I'm only at the beginning of research. I can go on to the next slide now. Yeah, so this is a more detailed view of the lineage of Japheth. I have researched pretty much all of those names. This has only been possible, I think. The seed of my research has only really happened since the introduction of AI, which was for me about 6 months ago. So a Mongol Turkic legacy, yeah, through Genghis Khan, and there are a lot of interesting names there. I think other important people that were removed from our history, but are still there. I mean, the references are there, the libraries are there. I mean, my suspicion does start though with Japheth not being spoken and written about at all much by Moses, which I think is a worthy reason for that lineage. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. I will make all this information available. This was a great find, very old manuscript. I think this was a German researcher trying to chronologically for the Ottoman, this chronologically organized Asian history. The connection between the German people and Iran is interesting as well because there is a story that the Persian people interchange the K with the G, and that's where the name Germany comes from. It actually comes from Iran, which gives us that ancient connection between Persia. I mean, Persia didn't exist at the time, but the Tartarian Empire or Iranian Empire, which later became the Ottoman Turkic Empire, and their ability to conquer large areas of land and conquer, going on and on and on. When they unified in the 8th century with the Moors, so you get that Tartar and Moor, and they started to develop new ways of constructing buildings. So you get mortar, which is the combination of Moorish and Tartarian technology. And we use the word Moor all the time. We use the word Moor without thinking about it because we're referencing the Moor. And we have to end up just accepting that first universities were Moorish, Ethiopian, Mauritania, Southern Europe, Spain. And yeah, we just have to accept that Tar refers to the color of the skin, that the Aryan refers to another lineage, probably a Persian, Iranian lineage. Okay, I can move on to the next slide. So this is obviously Genghis Khan's lineage. Could we actually think of him as Chinese, which is actually not, I don't think that's accurate either. So the inventions of electromagnetic energy were taken from the Tartar and the Aryan lineage. The Tartar and the Aryan lineage, in my opinion, includes not only Asian people, but it also includes European. So a European Asian culture existed, and at the very foundation of that was Kemet, the Moors, the Egyptians. Now the Egyptians already had electromagnetic knowledge thousands of years ago. And I hope that there are a few people who've seen this, and I hope that there are a few people who sort of understand that this is not fiction. This is not some Hollywood movie. these people understood high voltage power supply. They had cathodes and anodes. This doesn't make any sense in any other context. You have to see that what they were creating here was a very large electromagnetic device. This is not a lamp or an early electric light or anything like that. This is not an incandescent bulb. This is energy. Now, who taught them that? I love hearing people's theories. I can't answer that question. I don't know exactly who's giving them this information. Hollywood is going to tell you, we have to explore that they were ancient aliens. Personally, I believe that this is a realm that we live in, which is enclosed, and people are constantly being reset. Civilizations are constantly destroying themselves and starting again. And everything that you see around you, from your bicycle to your electric car, to your computer, to the QR code on the pamphlet that you get every day and throw away, all of that is ancient reverse engineered technology. That there really is nothing new. And when you find out that Romans had concrete, and you realize Egyptians were using etheric energy to create a type of a type of physical substance that they could eat in different chambers in the king's chamber of the pyramids, and that this was going to give them enlightenment, which is just another word for a higher intellectual, in like functioning of your brain. It's just functioning at a higher level, like a great ancient Socrates, or allowing your brain to think freely without any distraction. And I mean, there's so many ways to do that. Unfortunately, a lot of the ways that we enlighten or can be enlightened seem to be considered to be illegal or fringe by society, which is a control mechanism. Make no doubt about it. Okay, I can move on to the next slide. Yeah, so great technology of the old world. So I always like to go back to the bells. I think that some of the greatest inventions in the history of the human race came from the bell tower. Bells are used today for all kinds of things. We are using bells, not just sound frequency. We use the bell to create the first cannon, the first mortar, the first field gun. These were exactly the same people that built the bells. They adapted their own skills of metalworking and blacksmithing, technology given to them by the Moors to create the first cannon. The same people had to adapt their skills. Then we have the diving bell in the 1700s, early 1800s. Bells were adapted to allow people to dive underwater for the first time. People could stay underwater for elongated periods of time because they understood where that inspiration came from. It came from the bell, and it was called the diving bell. In Hollywood movies, you will see things taken from ancient law and changed or altered, turned into something completely different. In Prometheus, which is actually the god of creation that the Greeks and the Romans believed in, you do get the Baghdad battery, which is probably one of the earliest 250 BC devices found, which was also actually found in hieroglyphs in Egypt. But India is by far one of the most impressive, has one of the most impressive collections of large ancient architectural structures. I mean, the Hampi chariot comes to mind. There are temples, stupas, ancient Vimanas that seem to look like they were placed there, and nobody really understands how they were constructed. But I feel that there's not much about India shown really in the military, and there's not much when it comes to education, because these are unexplained palaces carved out of mountains. I mean, there are just incomprehensible structures there. When you look at the temple, you think it's standing on pillars, then you realize there's a gap underneath every pillar. The use of magnetic stones, I mean, the amount of sculptures that have like double entendres and double meaning, triple meaning, things that are carved out of stone that look like very intricate 3D printing, and you can't believe that that's even possible. And you can't even understand it. It's illogical how these structures could have ever been constructed. So you just can't say that they were made by humans hundreds of years ago with chisels and hammers and horses drawing cards. It's just not possible. And it's very hard for us, I think, because human psychology rarely allows us to walk away from something without act. And if that doesn't inspire one to look deeper and to understand that our history is just guesswork. I mean, everything that we learn at school was just guesswork. Saying that pyramid was a burial chamber or was all about burying a pharaoh who probably lived and died within 80 years. Why would you start building a burial pyramid for somebody that hasn't been born yet? How would you even know that they're going to be born and they're going to need this at some point? I mean, you would have to have multiple generations of pyramids being built simultaneously to provide a burial chamber for each generation and their possessions. It's just guesswork. I mean, we are not in the year 2025, and we don't understand where we are and what's going on. I don't want to go too much into the actual timeline, but there are lots of buildings and facades. Once you do study the architecture, you realize there's some technology involved. At the end, these are Leyden jars. They were usually filled with salt water. They were used, first of all, in the 1600s by sailors who would have bottles full of Leyden, full of different kinds of vinegar or salt water, and they would have a central copper anode or a copper coil placed inside. Then all of those would be connected to an electric light, and they would provide electricity. And sailors could see inside the hull of the ship at night. They would have an electric light. You wouldn't have to burn wax, which was obviously very rare and hard to come by, especially on long voyages. And there are lots of sailors that did that. Well documented that electricity was already available in the 1600s and before, and they were used mainly by sailors. Now, sailors, and especially pirates of the Berber coast, were actually the ancestors of the Moors that ruled Spain and Portugal. Once your city is destroyed, you have nowhere to go, so you end up on a ship. And their technology and their understanding of ancient Kemet, because that's obviously where they came from, would have given them all kinds of advantages. And then pirates almost became a nation unto themselves after the Reconquista, the removal of the Moorish Empire from Europe, which I think was completed around 1750, 1790. So yeah, the pirates had that technology because they were not originally pirates. Uh, then you have this beautiful central sketch, which is trying to describe the etheric energy around us. So the atmosphere or the energy of the atmosphere, which actually I consider to be one of the most important theories connected to Tartaria. Because if the ether was actually an element in the periodic table at one point and was removed, then we have to find out why it was removed. And in the 1920s, etheric energy or the ether was part of the periodic table. Now, the periodic table was invented by Mendeleev. He discovered the periodic table or periodic system, as he called it, 1869. Now, I think that's also somebody who went through old Moorish libraries, but that's just my personal opinion. And I think that that's also very much a piece of Tartarian technology, because these old buildings, again, do not make sense, especially when you look at the sheer gravitas of some of these structures, especially the ones found in America. Now, America is supposed to be the new world. I mean, there was nothing there until the 80s. In fact, islands like California were not fully explored until like the 80s. When you look at the structures now, when you look at the architecture and the ornamentals, People can't recreate that architecture. So that's left over from another civilization that understood something about the sky, something about high altitude and energy that can be harnessed from there. And we knew about this in the 1920s. We knew about this in the original periodic table. Dmitry Mendeleev knew about this, and it's very interesting that the word chemistry actually does originate with the name chemist, which is the original name for Egypt. And I think that brings me on to Tesla a little bit as well. But we can go on to the next slide. Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, electricity and free energy or etheric energy. I'll put that on pause for a few minutes while I talk about this. So these are three great images. Again, giving us more confidence that when we do speak about Tartaria, we're actually talking about a lost piece of human history, a piece of our DNA that will ring truer with some of us than others, especially if we are Tartarian, especially if we've forgotten our own identity. We are, in fact, these people that were, Asian Europeans, who settled, in Europe or Asia. I did a little bit of research on some of the moorheads here. This is Alahira Sultan Tartan. So yeah, after a while, you sort of like on a very superficial level are just looking for the word Tartan. And it's surprising how truth meets you halfway. Like, you don't have to be a seasoned researcher. You don't have to be highly qualified. You don't have to be a genius, or even have a background in history or political, ancient old world, art, fine art. Um, but it does. I mean, it does help, of course. But it's just something that you become an expert in. It doesn't take that long to become an expert in something. It actually doesn't take that long. You can do it within a year or two. I mean, if you're thinking about something every day, I think after a few months, the amount of information that your brain can hold on to is quite incredible because it becomes something that you're looking for. So your brain is singling out things, and if you're already kind of visually interested in the topic, yeah, there's nothing like that. And I mean, there are lots of great communities now. Back in 2020, when I started my research, there weren't that many people talking about it. So Tartary, this is actually French. We are looking at the attire of a noble woman, and it's wonderful. It's actually very unusual. I think they've been using the names in movies a lot. I think that in Star Wars they copied some of the attire of the royal family of the Tartarian. They even had an empire in Star Wars called uh, what was the name? I forgot the name of the empire. I think it was a planet anyway. Uh, in Star Wars. Yeah. And the interesting thing, why I was pretty sure what I was looking at was Tartaria, was because there was a short scene where a spaceship, I think it's the Millennium Falcon, arrives uh, on the planet, and all of the architecture with these kind of like Ottoman Turkish domes, and I was like, they've taken this straight out of Tartarian architecture. And then I saw the same thing in Game of Thrones. In Game of Thrones, the name is, I think, Targaryen. So Game of Thrones is trying to give us the accurate history of the world, or at least the ancient world, not the modern world. But they are always have. I mean, they always have to hide it behind fiction because as soon as you get too close to the truth, there are some problems. People probably won't let your movie be seen. So the Targaryens are the Tartarians in Game of Thrones. They actually have a very similar situation where they are stuck in some rural rocky mountains. They don't have anywhere to go. They have the technology to kind of rule the world, but they're in an uncomfortable situation and they don't have a link with like fertile land. They don't have a great or they don't have great prospects for trade, that kind of thing. And it's really informative, and it can give you clues, and it can move you forward in your research. The central image is a Jesuit map. It actually shows Tartaria right at the top. I don't know if you can see that right next to the chest of one of the Persian like merchants. And at this point, this is like we're talking about. Like I think this was the 1700s. You can see here that China has started to move inwards, maybe with help from other empires, maybe Moorish empires, maybe some European kings have helped China. Maybe trade helped China grow its army and start to move in on the Khan's territory. But it's still there, Tartaria. And it's kind of crazy. Why has nobody seen this at all? Why is this only really come out into the open? Yep. So the most important thing is the Sultan's head, the Sultan's headdress. This is obviously Persian. This is maybe an Iranian or possibly like an Uzbek Sultan. He also has three more heads on the sigil, which means that he uh, he is he is in coalition, or he is the offspring of three Moorish kings, or one of them is facing left, the other one right. The Moors love to change direction depending on which empire they were from, so they're staring or looking at the empire they are originating from. So we have one Tartar, two Moors, and the Moor heads are very important. They are wearing banners there, which means before the 1600s, not sorry, it's after the 1600s, not before. Before the 1600s, those were crowns. Those were all crowns. The Moors always had crowns. Today they will tell you that the Moor heads mean that those were the conquered Moors. That is not what they put on their war banners or family crests. That I disagree with wholeheartedly. The Moors or the children of the Moors had those curly red locks, in my opinion, and I think there's a connection there to the to what a Moor is. Is a Moor always an African man? It's probably not always an African man, as there are different kinds of Moors. I can move on to the next slide. Yes, so my research in Asia, and I've been comparing buildings around the world to each other. And my research in Asia has been, to a large extent, the architecture. I have looked at other things like water irrigation, culture, ornamentals, pillars, things like that. But the architecture is profound because it's identical. It's not almost the same. It's the same god, the same symbolism, the same apocanthus leaves, the same facets, the Roman bundle twigs, exactly the same. I've seen those in small fishing villages in Taiwan. I saw those buildings in Shanghai. I've seen pretty much the same architecture all around the world, which is not something you can just say was a desire to emulate another empire. It's the culmination of an empire. You need people to have families, schools, farms, water irrigation. You need energy to be. You need some way for people to travel. You need railways for an industrial revolution to occur. You have to have schools and universities that teach people how to construct and build it. You can't just do what they did with the World's Fair and lie to the entire world and tell them that the buildings were made of wood, plaster of Paris, and staff, and that they bothered to put supportive scaffolding on the building that did not have the idea or the solution or the wherewithal to incorporate the scaffolding into the actual structure, which is a very well documented architectural technique. We have had so many of the images now that come up on Google search engines that are just completely fake in Photoshop. I think AI is also being used in various ways. There are so many people now just adding scaffolding to old buildings, pretending that these buildings were built recently, and it's an epidemic. I mean, it is a serious epidemic, and it makes me so angry because it's people attempting to kind of change history, and there's nothing worse than that. Like, who do you think you are? You can change history. Come up with your own theories, by all means, but don't start editing old images trying to make it look like buildings that are ancient. That's just, that I can't stomach that. But I've seen a lot of A lot of the old photographs also have the skies edited out so you can't see other structures in the background. So the great age of the airship is a fascinating part of Tartarian history. I believe the reason why airship mooring towers had the name mooring towers was because the first airships were also moored. And they are ancient. Airships are not a new thing. This is ancient technology. We used to travel. Even not long ago, even my grandmother said she traveled on an airship. She had many airships cross over where she lived as a child. That was a way that people flew from America to Europe all the time. There were routes from London, Florida, New York, Berlin, Venice. There were all kinds of famous routes that people would take in balloons. So I don't think balloons were as slow as they tell us. I don't think balloons were as dangerous as we are led to believe. I think that there was a, an embargo with America supplying helium, which means that Germany had to then use the alternative helium that was hydrogen. And that's when you get the Hindenburg disaster and things like that. But before then, there were hundreds of different model Zeppelins. Even America had its own line of airships. Britain had its own line of airships. Tartaria had its own line of airships. And it's hard to find images like that because I think it's the airship that they were blocking out. Because when you start to realize that every palace had its own mooring station, any president could go up to the top of the mooring station and get out. Yeah. Even here in the Republic of China, if you go to the president's palace, it's a mooring station. I mean, it's identical to the German Rathaus in Berlin that was also a mooring station. And then you suddenly realize that every city had these. And where did the power come from? I mean, that was not the age of incredible like electrical inventions, was it? Actually, it was. Actually, it was. That's the interesting thing. We just haven't been told about it. So Germany and Japan have the identical Swinger. The Swinger is, and there are beautiful structures. So the Swinger and the Grün Gewölbe are probably the most beautiful ones. We have also the Semper Opera house in Dresden. A lot of these were destroyed or seriously damaged during the war, and I think Japan also lost, very large, very important ancient Tartarian structures. Uh, the connection between Tartaria and Japan is an amazing one. Goes back many centuries. There are all kinds of islands there being discovered, and I don't know how in 2024 you can still be discovering islands. But just last year they discovered another 7,000 islands around Japan. Also have structures on. It just I don't really understand how it's possible. I mean, they must be lying to us. I think they knew about the islands, but they didn't want to tell anyone yet. But yeah, to have the identical palaces, these beautiful Baroque palaces in both Japan and Germany is just insane. I'll never get over that. And I think when I compare in Taipei the President's Palace to the Rathaus in Berlin, and you kind of do this mirror image where you kind of change the opacity and compare them, it blows your mind. It blows your mind because it's the same geometry. It's the same religion. It's the same ascension to heaven. It's the same belief in God. And the Tartarian Empire answers that question. And I think that's why people are, you know, drawn to it. Let's have a look at the next slide. Yes, so flags. Yeah, I would have forgotten to talk about flags. So flags are incredible. You don't expect to see a flag of an empire you've never heard of. But there are actually a lot of empires. You've never heard of. So I mean, we may be talking about Tartaria today, but there are a couple of others that we could also start to discuss. I think after. But Tartaria was just such an extremely important and powerful empire that for us to have somehow missed it out of our history means that the people that are writing our history books are either incredibly incompetent or are what I think is actually trying to hide the lineage chapter or the true identity of the Tartar. And what if a lot of us are Tartarian? And what if a lot of us are in fact, an important lineage in biblical prophecy? So some of the symbolisms you see are the dragon. The dragon is incredibly important. It is not some kind of evil, satanic symbolism. It is actually the flag of the empire, and it was the flag of the empire for many years. Actually, dragons have been the flags of many empires, and those two all connected to each other with some Egyptian or Moorish or Aryan connections, especially Iran, Bhutan. I think Wales even has a dragon, which means that we need to look at Celtic. Maybe the Normans were also people of color. If we find out, and if I find out in the next few weeks about my research into the Normans, specifically the Norman language, Norman invasion, those were all also African North, then I think we can rewrite every history book known to man up until today. I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine that? Can you imagine every history book is going to be rewritten because everyone was stuck at home researching online during 2021. Okay, so Tartary also is it could be looked upon as a dragon, but it also looks like a griffin. And griffins are a wonderful rabbit hole to go down because they were mythical creatures that were used in war. Obviously, today they are extinct. And the reason why I believe they were once real living creatures, a body of a lion, a head of a bird. I think you'd be surprised what creatures have existed that are extinct that we consider to be part of fairy tale. And also we have the Tartary owl. Now the owl is very important. I think that is a symbol for the lesser Tartary, but it also creates a connection with the Greeks and sort of little Tartary also had griffins on. There were three griffins. Sometimes the griffins replaced other things, like with the moorheads being replaced by other animals, like sometimes owls. But the Tartary owl is well known and documented, and that's at the bottom there, right at the bottom right corner. You also see a large pair of scissors. That's the original weapon for the Moroccan Empire. That took me a long time to research because I couldn't work out why there were scissors there. But scissors originally were a weapon of the Moroccan Empire, and they also the same flag that was used in America. The Native Americans had the same flag. So the original Morocco may have also incorporated America. And then when you look at the word Morocco, we are told that Amerigo Vespucci was an explorer, and that's why it's called America. But it's probably not correct either. We are probably looking at a Morocco, or America being the original Moroccan empire. And there is documentation proving that if you called yourself Moroccan, you would not be treated as a slave and you could leave the country. But that was never something that was publicly advertised. So most people just didn't know who they were. I think that's one thing. And I think it's still hard for people to identify who they are. You know, are you native? Do you come from another country? And the truth may blow your mind. But look at these flags. I mean, you're never going to get closer to truth than really old encyclopedias. Yeah. Yeah, Tartary was on those flags. Tartary is a real empire. It's a very important one. We can move on to the next slide. It's going to start dividing people. So Tartarian dragons, owls, Cynocephali, and griffin. The Cynocephali is a man with the head of a dog. The man with the head of the dog is something that I am an expert on. I have thousands of images of everything from Roman sculptures to Orthodox church murals of men with dog's head. They were a very large empire. They ruled very large parts of Tartary. The dog men were defeated, and if anyone was any of those people from that era knew that we had dogs that have four legs today, they would not believe us. In the same way that we would not believe them if they told us that men used to have dogs. Large areas of land were ruled by the Cynocephali, but you need a really open mind to accept that. This is a more high-resolution copy of the two flags of the Empire, Tartary, the Middle Tartary, or the Middle Eastern Tartary, the flag could be owl. The Empire of Tartary flag with the griffin, that was still the badge for the Republic of China Police Department up until the 1990s. So I know for a fact that that is a profound connection there with the Republic of China, not the Republic of China, the Republic of China and Tartary. But there are still links. There are all kinds of links in everyday culture with the police department, with religion, with towers, temples, so many connections. So what about um, the Russian going to Europe, the Russian British, and the Bolshevik Revolution? The revolution in China destroyed temples. Why were they targeting religion? Was religion such a bad thing? No, they were targeting religion because religion was the old empire. Religion was the identity of Tartary. They wanted to remove Tartary. The communists wanted to remove Tartary. The Bolsheviks wanted to remove Tartary. They were threatened by an empire that understood, that was educated, that was in touch with nature. That this photo here, like super super important. It's like one of my greatest finds this year, for example. So there was a great Tartarian lineage, in my opinion, and it only takes 3 generations for facial features to completely change. I was actually talking to this about Elizabeth 2 weeks ago. It isn't something that takes that, which is important because this photo, and I'm not the first person, I'm probably the third person to do that, started to discuss. But it is information that is available online. There was nothing when I started doing this research. Now there are at least 3 or 4 people. So this is the Tsar Nicholas II of Russia wearing a military type uniform. Now the Russian Imperial Army was also the Tartarian army. I know that that's kind of crazy because it's bringing it so close to home. We kind of jumped 2 centuries, but there was a big revolution in Europe first in the 1700s, and the French royalty were guillotined. And after this happened, the German royal family decided, well, we can't stay in mainland Europe. We have to find another place. Now, if you have all the money and power in the world, you already have all the gold. You are going to try to find an island nation for safety. So the Gotha, Coburg, Habsburg, all of ancient Tartarian lineages, they end up in Britain. They changed their name to the to the Windsor, the more accepted, localized name, and you start to adapt to the native people of the island that you've moved to. And then I think this is well documented. It's not a secret that the German royal family is the current British royal family. And now Queen Victoria had 4 sons. It's quite important. 3 of them became king. One became king of Russia. The other one king of Germany, and then we also or emperor of Germany, a Kaiser of Germany, and king of England. Now to have this kind of power, it was almost like a new foothold for the future for the Tartarian Empire. All of these people are black Moorish lineage. And again, this is my research. This is what I come up with. Some people are going to disagree. When I found the tattoo on his arm, this photo of him in casual military garb, I started to look for tattoos on everyone. So I spent quite a long time looking for tattoos because I thought that could then be the symbolism of Tartary. I'd be looking for the Chinese flag. Unfortunately, the Tartarian flag is not the one with the dragon next to it, but there are others. So you have the dragon tattoo, which is that symbolism that you need. I can look at the next slide now. Yeah. Quantum feeling. This is something Campbell was talking about in great detail. Probably everything I know was in some way connected to Campbell, Michelle Gibson, all of these people are great inspirers. This new generation, John Levi. So autodidactic, very good at the quantum healing. The fact that the Tartarians understood we have this great electromagnetic shield around us, this healing energy, this this very powerful multiple layered body part, and it is under attack. That's why you don't want buildings that remind you of your ancestry or your great potential. You want buildings that are black, soulless, soul destroying, because you want to remove that. Otherwise, human beings can't really be controlled. There's always a chance, I guess, that human beings are going to judge you if you commit some kind of terrible atrocity. And I think what happened with the revolutions is the Tartarian lineage, or definitely the royal family, you realize that uh, you just can't get away with anything. To control the masses is a very hard thing to do. And yeah, so the metaphysical art of creating coherence in the bodies of consciousness was the purpose of these bells. And it's not just sound, we're also talking about light. So it is not a coincidence that sound frequencies different octaves are identical to the picture of a rose window on the cathedral ship. But the thing is, people actually had these all over the place, not just churches, cathedrals. They had these restaurants, private property, private homes. They were also using the sound to ward off evil spirits and parasites. So parasites and the cleansing of human anatomy, basically. Every octave applies to a part of your body, like 7 chakras on your spine. You can go all the way from the ground chakra to the crown chakra, and you can target part of the body. And as a child, I remember hearing bells. I lived about 9 years in Germany, where my father was working there, and there were regular times in some of these like smaller villages. It wasn't just once a day. It was I think 4 times a day. I think you get one in the afternoon, one at night. So this would set you up. This would prepare your body, clean out your maybe even help people to digest food. I mean, if you keep thinking about it, just what a frequency can accomplish. And I think that's what the structures these buildings were. And it was also used as a weapon. The bells were used as a weapon. There were very large sound wave weapons constructed by Otto von Bismarck against Napoleon, where he was just stopping the troops from advancing towards certain positions using these large trumpet-like trolleys. And yeah, I mean, when you realize the power of sound, both negative, positive energy, and the transference of this dimension. But I mean, we can't see anything outside of this ultraviolet, infrared light scope. So you start at, infrared and go to ultraviolet, and anything outside of that, we aren't able to really fully comprehend. But if we could see the power emitted from our skulls sent out into the sky, if we could see just how powerful one human being is and how much you can affect in your like 10-mile radius. If something's wrong, something bad's happening, it's gonna affect you. You have senses that you don't understand, and I think most of us have absolutely no idea. I mean, if we got this wrong about the history of the world, then we missed out an entire empire. Imagine how little we actually know about, energy field. For, for example, so many times I turn around and I don't know why I'm turning around. I just want to turn around and someone's staring at me. Like, how did my body recognize that? What sense am I not being told about that I have that allows me to sense, people looking at me? I mean, I'm not using my eyes, right? So I mean, how could we train that? Are we really using our bodies, especially our full body consciousness, um, the way that we should? So if we do have the ether above us, we do have this energy that is actually giving us life force. Then what do other cultures kind of think of that? And I think they all have the same. I think they all naturally came to the same conclusion because they were all at one time taught this information by a single one world empire. That was no doubt Tartaria, and because it was a one world empire, and because somehow it did kind of seem to fail, that's why it was removed. Because when you realize that even the most powerful empire on earth was removed by God or by some war in heaven or by angels, and people have different ideas about the date, it was like the 1800s, 1940s, 1770s, to be like a big reset event. And then if these resets keep happening, who's doing that? Is that God? Are we still just being observed by God and we do this kind of recording? And if an empire as big as Tartarian had to be removed from history in order for us to never find out, that there is some omnipotent superior creator that we're really being kind of judged. So I mean that's quite a fascinating theory as well. But yes, if it's connected to the architecture, it's absolutely connected to the Tartarian theory. I can look at the next slide now. But yeah. So these are some images that I haven't seen shared that much. Here we can see a definite relationship between the Chinwe and the Tatar. I think the Chinwes, or Genghis Khan Empire, and the Tartarian sort of Tamerlane Empire then were together, and I think they were definitely in alliance. So you could say that the Tartarians, Chinwes, and the Moors could have made up Grand Tartary. If you look at the Peking city map, you will see a Tartary city, which was invaded. Tartary city was by during the Boxer Revolution. And there's also another image here of a woman that looks very large, very tall. It's got like a Persian Moroccan urn. She's called Jun File. So File is obviously a girl Tatari, so a girl of the Tartarian. These are massive people. These were giants. So yeah. So Grand Tartary is not just a reference. I don't think it's a sign of the landmass controlled by the empire, but also the stature of the people themselves. But if you look closely at her face, you can definitely see a pale Caucasian European. Again, Iranian-looking woman. So this is the lineage of Japhet. This is the part of the history we don't necessarily have to connect to the Moors as we do most of the history. And then at the end is Tartary Dastragan. So this looks like a pipe. Uh, this is a Hom, obviously man, Tartarian man. So try to look at the garments they had. Very sophisticated culture. They did live with the tartan, the stripe line, which we can we can obviously connect the tartan to Benin, the great empire that used tartan, and then the Scottish tartan. So there's an obvious connection there between Africa and Scotland to the the dresses, the tartan fabric. Actually happening, and his hat as well. His hat is very Middle Eastern, Turkish, almost European. So we can move on to the next one. Oh, there isn't a next. Was that the last one? Yeah, that's the last one. Okay, yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, that's I think I gone a bit over, or no, I haven't gone over too much. Yeah, so that is what I can fit into this particular. It is hard to not carry on and fit in a lot of other things. I hope I can maybe focus everyone's mind on not just proving that this is an empire, but trying to uncover now how it connects to our known history of the world. And I think once those two can meet, once we can get Tartary to be looked at not as some kind of conspiracy theory, but an actually missing part of history that somebody has either removed or people just didn't know about, and that's wonderful. It's really invigorating to a new generation of people, researchers. to know that our history has not been fully explored, and what other important kind of avenues of research are there? How can we identify who we are? Because we're not all the same. We didn't all come from the same place. There are just too many differences in culture. But one empire for sure is responsible for great palaces in Asia, Europe, Africa, all over the world. Who were they? How did they construct them?
Hi, that was fascinating. I love that. I really, really loved that. The sound kept coming in and out a little bit, which was a bit annoying. I hope everyone else could hear it, but it was just fascinating. I know that you're an amazing researcher, and I know that you put hours and hours and hours into this. I'm just inviting Guy to come on, but I'm just looking at the questions to see if anyone's got any interesting questions here.
There's one about the Bosnian pyramid.
Yeah, can you see the questions where you are?
I can, yes, I can. Wow, there's a lot of questions.
Cool.
How do I answer these? Can I just anything?
Yeah, just speak.
Okay, let me go back.
So someone's asking about Cathay. Someone's asking about the fallen angel statue found in Russia.
Yeah, that's very, very cool. Well, I mean, there are lots of theories about things turning to stone. I mean, we have the biblical story of Lot's wife turning to stone. She looked back at the city of Lot. Sorry, not the city of Lot, Sodom and Gomorrah. And apparently Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed because of... yes, yeah, my grandmother finished. And the petrification of animals happens quite quickly in certain parts of the world, especially certain lakes that are high in specific salt and minerals. There were 9 giants that fell in Turkmenistan. There are 9 craters, and the city is called the nine craters city or something. I think it's Turkmenistan. And they built 9 statues, 9 buildings inside each crater. So it is an internationally accepted theory that the fallen angels landed very recently, or at least the war in heaven happened very recently. I don't think it's the year like 2025. There are a lot of years that have been added on. Some people say 500 years. Pope Gregory definitely added on a few hundred years. Some of the facades have mistaken the letter J, which means Yara, which was introduced into the alphabet in the 1700s. But the letter J used to be an I, so the I was actually in the year of. But in German, it's Jahre, which means year. I think we've just turned we've just turned the I into a 1, and so almost like added on 1,000 years. But if you take away the 1,000 years, then the kind of dark ages become our industrial revolution. It gets kind of really complicated, and you have to study history and try to put things in perspective, because then you have Vikings and Romans living at the same time, and it is hard to get used to, because you've already had your narrative implanted at a young age if you paid attention to school. But yes, I mean, there's no way that we got from horse and carts to electric trams in the period of time that we did, and then all the other 1,000 years before, nobody had any idea how to improve upon a horse. It's just not possible. So it's, I mean, there's 1,000 years added on there, sure. I think there were more years added on, just to make it really hard for us to understand where we are. The Gregorian calendar also kind of made the months uneven, whereas we used to have a lunar calendar like they do in China today, where every month has the same days, I think 29 days. It just makes more sense. I mean, I understand where the 12 came from. That's the Sumerians counting on their hands. So they're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Right? So the thumb is your pointer, and then you're just counting the bones in your fingers. And you can do that when you buy goods. So we have 12 hours in the day, 12 hours in the night, 12 months in the year. So all of that makes sense logically.